Hey guys, kinggath here, and in this playlist I'm going to go over the various mechanics and systems that make up Conqueror. At the end of this video I'll also talk about some of the motivations and decision making that went into the design of Conqueror and the ultimate direction we're heading. So there's a lot to cover in this series, and I'm breaking things down into smaller videos in this playlist. If you've watched my previous in-depth series playlists, it's the same thing but for Conqueror, but unlike those other in-depth series, Conqueror itself is much more intertwined with its different mechanics, so it's harder to watch an individual video and understand exactly what I'm talking about. So if you are skipping around the videos to watch about mechanics and you hear me mentioning a mechanic you're not familiar with yet, it's largely because I couldn't explain one without the other, and you might need to go watch that other video that I talk about. So I will try and give these videos all appropriate descriptions and titles so that you can find the information you want. Ultimately, though, your best experience will be watching the entire playlist from beginning to end, but obviously not all of you guys has the massive amount of time available to do so. But I will try in each topic at least give you enough information so that you'd be comfortable going in game and experimenting with that feature if you haven't already. So that covers the playlist itself. If you just came here for a quick intro so you knew what you're about to get yourself into with this playlist, you've got it. Go ahead and head to the next video. But for those of you who have watched my other in-depth series, you'll know that I also like to take the time to discuss a lot of the motivations and the inspiration behind the expansion. I want to talk about where we're headed in the long term and why we made some of the decisions that we've made so far. So originally, Conqueror wasn't conceived as an expansion at all, but actually just an anniversary patch for the Rise of the Commonwealth expansion, which is the one that introduced city plans to sim settlements. What the idea was to allow you to pre-start the game with a bunch of those city plans in place, with the idea that it would make it like there were a bunch of little diamond cities all over the world that you could explore, and it would make each game, each new character you started feel completely unique because the world would be a little bit different. Well, once we built that framework out and we started experimenting with it, the idea of RuinedWorld came into the picture. And when we started running raids against those settlements, it changed the whole scope of things because we realized it was way more fun to attack settlements that weren't your own. One of the problems with RuinedWorld was that you could only attack your own settlements, so likely you spent a ton of time designing and building these up. You were probably role-playing out a story for how your character was related to all of your settlers. Maybe you recruited a lot of named NPCs, gave houses to your companions, and you really felt like you had a tie to them, so then to suddenly subjugate them to raiders just felt wrong. So we had an opportunity here to change all that, and that's where Conqueror was born. At its heart, Conqueror is about transforming settlements from a city management game to an empire and army management game, something closer to a strategy game like an RTS or a 4X rather than a city simulator. So while there are still management and building tasks you do in your settlements in Conqueror, they are all in support of building up that bigger and stronger army so that you can take over more of the map for your favorite faction. If you think about the gameplay loop of something like StarCraft, the way it works is you are constantly chasing more resources so that you can support additional and stronger troops so that you can expand your territory to get more resources. But the larger you got, the harder it was to maintain your territory because your focus is split and an enemy is trying to do the same thing. So you have to invest your resources in a way that allows you to control as much territory as possible. And it created this really, really great gameplay loop that I think will fit perfectly in the settlement system of Fallout 4, and even is backed up by the factions and the war that's kind of going on in the background of the main storyline. Now, one of the issues that comes up constantly when we're adding in these new gameplay mechanics into Fallout 4 is at the end of the day, we don't want you to lose the feel that you're playing an RPG. We still want you to be able to take your time and go out and enjoy the stories, play through quests, and just explore the game world while still enjoying all these new systems that we're bringing in. To do that, we followed the same pattern with Conqueror that we did with Sim Settlements, which is to slow things way down. This is why there's large amounts of time between when you upgrade your different city plans in Sim Settlements and why the attacks that happen in Conqueror are spread way out, is we want to make sure that you have plenty of downtime between your management tasks to go do other things. Now we want to tie it all together so that you can also take your experiences out in the world playing the RPG and exploring the game world and have them provide a benefit to your gameplay loops in the settlements. And that's why we've had the investment system. So we've had things like with Rise of the Commonwealth, being able to donate things and being able to take your companions and put them in charge of your settlements to gain bonuses. We followed these same patterns with Conqueror. So I've mentioned RTS a few times, or real-time strategy, and I'm sure some of you are thinking, well, that goes directly against everything you just said about slowing the game way down to give us time to play RPGs. Well, to me, a real-time strategy game and a turn-based strategy game have their loops are kind of the same until you get to the individual battles. Then you add in things like microing, and the mechanics of tactics more than strategy start to come into play. And this is where I think we can still have the marriage of both. We can still enjoy some of that micro and tactic gameplay at the individual battles for settlements. So if you've played Conqueror to this point, at the point this video was released, you'll know that we don't have a lot of that fine-tuned control over your soldiers. You lose plenty of guys to just bad AI, and these are some of the mechanics that we're going to invest more time with in the future. In a recent patch, again at the time of recording this video, we added the squad system. So you have a personal guard squad that you can directly command even during your attacks on settlements. And we'll be expanding on features like that. We can look to other games that have done similar things like Bannerlord, where you can have control of your troops while still being in the thick of things yourself, as opposed to just a disembodied head up in the sky. So we're going to take advantage of those things. We are going to look into some more God Simulator type things we can do to give you that overhead type control, but we are in an engine that's not designed for that. We're in a gameplay engine that was designed for first person and third person RPG action, and so we are limited by some of the gameplay rules that come with that, as well as the UI limitations, but we're going to break as many of them as we can. So watch for features in the future that will give you more of that tactical strategy gameplay that you love in RTSs to come to Conqueror as well. With the initial launch of Conqueror, we focused on the attacks. We wanted to make sure that you could have these big epic battles, bigger than what RuinedWorld was offering, between factions, and really feel like you are living through a moment of war. Something that outside of mods like War of the Commonwealth, I had never experienced prior in Fallout 4. The action is intense. Fighting through a big, heavily built city with loads of guards is crazy. It is so much fun. And like I said, you could do it with mods like War of the Commonwealth, but then that chaos was never ending. The whole world was like that all the time, and you never got a breather to stop and enjoy an RPG. So the way that we've done Conqueror is give you that control so you can choose when those big epic battles are happening, and then revert the game to a more calm state where you're playing an RPG or playing that city simulator. So with the Phase 2 mechanics, we wanted to roll in some more of that strategy gameplay loop. And this is what happened in the summer of 2019. We launched what we called the Phase 2 mechanics. And those were systems to ensure there was actually some strategy. You actually had to focus on building up resources and building up an army. And you had to put some thought into how they were stationed, where your soldiers went, whether or not each new territory was used for production or for housing additional soldiers. And so the combination of all these things, plus those battles, we're almost there. We've got that feel of a strategy game in that we actually have to care about how we're using our resources. We've got to deal with micro battles to make sure we have a strong enough group of soldiers and tactics that work. But we're missing a key element, and that is what's coming in Phase 3. That missing piece is the enemy, and not just an enemy. It can also be just other forces that have goals and strategies of their own. Right now, we have none of that. We don't have any AI-controlled opponent. We don't have the systems in place to do anything like that, and that's what we want to get to. We want you to be able to live out these dream scenarios where, imagine for, say, the Brotherhood of Steel rolls in on the Pridwin, and they immediately begin taking over territories with the goal of making them vassals to their empire. And then they start building up outposts with troop stations, and slowly but surely they take over the map, and eventually they come into conflict with you and decide that you should no longer have the technology at this big epic tier 3 city that you've got going on, and then what are you going to do about it? And those types of scenarios are what we want to see play out. Imagine further into the storyline, you make an enemy with the Institute and they decide it's time to invade and take away all of your territory. Things like this could occur in the system that we're dreaming up. So it's going to take a long time to get there. We don't have the elements of this because we're playing a first-person RPG, not a strategy game. So none of the back-end systems we need to pull this off exist. All of this has to be coded from scratch. So this is late game stuff that we're talking about in the development line of Conqueror. At the time of this video recording, we're over a year into Conqueror's lifetime, which means we've been developing it for probably a year and a half now. And we've got at least another year of development planned for it to get to all this stuff. And then depending on how things go, much more after that. It all depends on, the player base, depends on a lot of different things in the community. What are Bethesda's latest releases? Are there still people interested in modding the game, etc.? But that's our hopeful long-term goal. In the meantime, Conqueror does provide a little bit of an AI opponent in the sense that we've got enemies that will attack you periodically and that can take your bases just for the sake of making sure you have to acknowledge the gameplay balance systems that are in, because if we didn't have some sort of foil, there would be no penalty for ignoring our balance systems. So right now they're kind of random, they don't have much meaning, and we want them to have meaning. We want them to have story meaning. We want them to give you a sense that you can create a goal and an objective and an enemy. We want all of those feelings to come into play. Now, to some of you, I think you share my excitement when I describe those Brotherhood and Institute type scenarios, but to others, I probably just described a nightmare scenario where they lose control of their game or they don't get to play out the RPG. And I just want to reiterate that with all of my mods, I love giving excessive amounts of controls. You can always disable things and turn off systems and cheat things and do whatever you want. And so all of these things I talked about would be optional systems. I will never force anything down your throat. At worst, we tend to enforce certain rules within our gameplay systems, but we don't force anything that would jump into your game and prevent you from playing it the way that you want to play it. In fact, if you've dreamt up other scenarios, say you just want to play a rampaging frontline raider who just goes around and murders everyone, or you've got a more complicated story, maybe you want to be able to run 2 faction groups at the same time, start 2 mini empires and then war them against each other. We want to just support all of that. If our gameplay systems can make it happen, we want to let you do it. And so there's lots more coming. It's more than just what I've described here. If you've started to have visions in your head about what you might be able to do with some of these gameplay mechanics, we'll probably let you do them. I am very excited to finally work on this series and share it with you guys. With the launch of this intro video, there will only be a few videos accompanying, but more will be released each week until we cover all of the existing mechanics. And then follow-up videos will be added to this playlist as we launch additional features for Conqueror. But I'm very, very excited to share my vision of the Fallout 4 settlement system as part of a grand strategy game. And I hope you guys will join us in the simsettlements.com forums. I love reading suggestions. I don't necessarily comment on them. In fact, I comment on very few of them, but it's awesome to see where your guys' heads are at and what you want to see out of these systems and how you think we can get closer to this grand vision for the mod and Fallout 4 in general. So I look forward to seeing you guys on the forums under the suggestions tab. And in the meantime, enjoy the rest of this in-depth series to teach you all of the Conqueror gameplay mechanics.